I was halfway through tying the silk scarf my late husband gave me when I heard the nurse in my kitchen telling my son, that I was slipping. Not just forgetting names or turning the stove off late, but too old to manage the checkbook. Meanwhile, I had already noticed 3 of my favorite pieces, my mother's emerald studs, my pearl bracelet, and that sapphire ring I bought myself for turning 60, had turned up odd. Same settings, same scratches, but a little too light in the hand, like a knockoff purse that looks right until you feel the vinyl. The nurse smiled at me with those patient eyes and said, "Don't worry, hun," while she was swapping my memories for a narrative where I didn't recognize my own life and apparently swapping my jewelry for fakes. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. I'm Evelyn, 68, retired chemist, grandmother of 2, and absolutely not ready to be placed on anyone's shelf like a porcelain doll. I didn't spend 4 decades balancing budgets, sterilizing glassware, and correcting men who still thought I should fetch their coffee to be told I couldn't count my own pennies. I like my house quiet in the mornings, my coffee strong enough to argue back, and my jewelry real. That last part is not vanity. It's history. Those pieces carried birthdays, anniversaries, and one very good apology tucked into their clasps. The nurse, let's call her Val, was about my daughter's age, with a tidy braid and a way of talking to me like I was both adored and inconvenient. I hired Val after last winter's fall, the one that left me with a purple hip and a deep distrust of step stools. From the start, Val made herself comfortable. She learned where the spare keys were, how I liked my oatmeal, stovetop, thank you, not from a microwave, and which cabinet hid the emergency fudge. She also learned that when my son, Mark, stopped by on Fridays, he always set his briefcase on the kitchen island and left it open, scattered with bank forms, envelopes, and the tiny calculator he refuses to use his phone for. I watched Val notice that, the same way I watch my grandkids notice a cookie jar. It was a small thing, but in my line of work, small things add up. The first time something felt off, I was dressing for church. The emerald studs looked back at me, green and mischievous under the lamplight. I've worn them since my mother's funeral. She'd have approved of a little beauty at a somber occasion. But when I picked them up that Sunday, they were lighter. Not by much, just enough that I frowned. I told myself I was imagining it, the way you do when your knee twinges and you blame the weather. 2 days later, the sapphire ring didn't seat as snug on my finger. Again, I shrugged it off. Maybe the heat had puffed me up. But that night, I took the pearl bracelet out of its case, and the clasp had a tiny burr where there never was one. I ran my nail over it 3 times, memory and muscle disagreeing. The pearls looked perfect, but I've handled enough compounds to know that looks right isn't the same as is right. And here's where Val got bold. She started dropping little lines into conversations. "Did you remember your water pill, hun?" in front of my granddaughter. "We don't want you mixing up your doses." Or, "Let me handle the check. Those decimals can be tricky," when I paid the housekeeper. She'd say these things with such sugar, you almost wanted to thank her for the embarrassment. The coup de grace was the afternoon she told my kids, both of them, sitting stiff-backed at my dining table, that she was concerned I was leaving burners on. I wasn't. I'm meticulous in the kitchen. The only thing I'd left on was my patience. Now, my kids are good kids. Mark is a spreadsheet with shoes, and Liza is the person you want in your corner when the airline loses your suitcase. They both hugged me, told me they weren't taking anyone's word over mine, and then looked at each other with that quiet agreement adult children make when they decide to be careful. Val saw that look and pressed her advantage. Maybe we set up automatic payments, simplify things. She was so helpful, it made me want to take up smoking just so I could flick ash in her general direction. I'm not a woman inclined to tantrums. I prefer recipes and experiments. The first thing I did was inventory my jewelry. Not the way I usually do, with a soft cloth and a half glass of Chardonnay on a Sunday. No, I sat at the dining table with a legal pad, my father's magnifying loupe, and a very bright lamp. Every piece got a note. Weight, approximate. I am not running a lab scale here. Visible hallmark, any nick or scratch I remembered. The replicas were impressive. I'll give Val, or her source, that. The hallmarks were copied, the metal looked right, but they lacked soul. Microscopic wear you can't fake unless you've lived in something. I marked 3 as suspect, and my heart went cold, not from loss, but from clarity. When you're a chemist, you spend a lifetime confirming hunches. My hunch said, Val's been swapping. My training said, establish evidence. So I did what any slightly miffed grandmother with a PhD might do. I went to my basement. Yes, my basement still smells like bleach and old book glue. On the back shelf, behind boxes labeled Thanksgiving tablecloths and Stephen King, Don't Lend to Mark, I keep a few relics of my career. Glass beakers, pipettes, and a locked case of oddments. Dyes, pH strips, and a benign little family of glow-in-the-dark powders left over from helping a police cadet neighbor with a science fair a decade ago. They're not sinister. Nothing here would harm a fly. They're the kind of compounds museums use to track hands-on artifacts, invisible under normal light, but they light up bright as gossip under UV. I called my neighbor, Donna, retired librarian, human lie detector. Come over for pie and a gossip, I said, and bring your reading lamp. She brought the pie and her reading glasses, and I brought my plan. We started small. That afternoon, while Val sorted my medicine, she was very keen on sorting, I cleaned the inside of my jewelry case. By cleaned, I mean I rubbed a clear solution over the velvet and the tiny bows of satin that hold bracelets in place. It dried invisible and harmless. But if someone handled the jewelry and then went somewhere under UV lights, well, the transfer would be very chatty. Then I had a second thought. Why not coat the metal itself? A thin, water-based layer, nothing that would harm real gold or pearls. If it stayed put on the authentic item, then the swap wouldn't transfer. But if someone exchanged my genuine item for a fake and handled it, the coating would end up on their skin, like invisible chalk dust. I put on nitrile gloves, old habits die hard, and carefully brushed a barely there film over the inside of clasps, the backs of settings, the undersides of rings where you press to pull them free. I let it dry. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, down to the crooked angle of the blue velvet ribbon my granddaughter once tugged. Then, I bought 2 plug-in security lamps. What a lovely euphemism. Marketed for scorpion detection in Arizona garages and teenage boy parties. They fit right into my front hall light fixtures. One flick, and the entryway would bathe in a nightclub purple that no one could miss. It's a trap, Donna said, licking apple filling off her fork. It's a test, I corrected. If she's innocent, I'll apologize with my best banana bread. And if she's not, we'll see. That very night, Liza called. Mom, Val told me you misplaced your checkbook. She must be confused, I said, because the checkbook was in my purse, as it has been for 1,000 years. I could find it in the dark while half asleep. I decided then that if I was going to be accused of confusion, I'd use it like camouflage. I started forgetting the small things I knew Val liked to fix. Where I put my reading glasses, I wore the spare. Where the remote was, taped under a shelf. Whether I had fed the cat, I had, twice. I apologized for making extra work. You're such a help, I told her, and watched her smile like a cat that thinks the canary is playing dead. 3 days later, the sapphire went missing. Not the fake,
my real sapphire. The one with a shallow scratch you could only feel when your finger knew where to look. I checked the case. The ring there looked identical, but the weight in my palm said cheap. I pressed the underside with my thumb, waiting for the little habit click I've always done before slipping it on. Nothing. "Val," I called, "have you seen my ring?" "Which one, hun?" She drifted in, shadow light, wiping her hands on a towel like she'd just saved a life in my kitchen. "The blue one." She leaned over the open case, breath held. "Oh, here it is." She plucked the fake from its place and laid it on the bedspread like a nurse revealing a newborn. The tone. I wanted to bottle that tone and sell it under the brand name Woman's Intuition. For when you want to identify a liar in 3 seconds flat.
That night, I wrote down everything. The date, the time, what we said. Mark calls my living room the evidence den now, and honestly, it wasn't far off. I have always kept good records. My former boss once told me I could annotate a tornado, so I kept annotating. The next day, I set the stage. I told Val I'd invited my book club for Saturday. Just 4 of us, an excuse to drink iced tea and complain about fictitious men. "Oh," she said, brightening. "I'm going to a party Saturday too, my cousin's birthday." She made a show of listing details I didn't ask for, the way people do when they're offering an alibi before you accuse them of anything. "I'll get you fed early and head out around 6. "Have fun," I said, and I meant it. I wanted her to have all the fun in the world while driving herself straight into her own mess. On Friday night, I swapped my hall lamps with the new security bulbs. They looked like normal frosted bulbs. Under them, the foyer looked ordinary, almost dingy, but with a click, they'd turn the space into a laboratory. I also placed one in the kitchen fixture above the island. Val likes to lean there, scrolling on her phone, while I pretend not to see. Saturday dawned soft and humid, the kind of summer day that makes curtains curl. I made lemonade. I wore an apron I stitched in 1987 that says "Stir Crazy" and keeps on giving. Val came on time, braid tight, face fresh. She put my pills in the little day-of-the-week boxes and swept my floors with a zeal I've never personally felt for a broom. Around 5:30, she said, "I might head out early to beat traffic. Is that okay, hun?" "Of course," I said, full of grandmotherly grace. "Be safe on the roads." She left at 5:42 p.m. I know, because I watched the driveway camera like a teenager waiting on the date's headlights. Yes, I have cameras. My son installed them after my fall, and I didn't fight him on that one. 5 minutes later, Donna texted, "Everything set?" I sent back a thumbs up and the kind of smiley my granddaughter says makes me look unhinged. The book club came. We discussed precisely 3 pages of the actual book before we wandered to the good stuff, neighbor drama, and an argument about whether lemon bars are a cookie or a bar. At 7:03 p.m., I got a text from Val. "Party is great," she wrote, followed by a picture of a crowded patio. I zoomed. The photo was too grainy to ID faces, but I could make out something important. Her left hand holding a plastic cup. On that hand, a gleam. I know the glint of my sapphire like I know the shape of my children's hands. My throat went so cold I had to put my tea down. "Is that?" Donna gasped over my shoulder, the librarian voice rising into the register reserved for late book returns and outrageous gossip. "It is," I said. I kept my voice low because my other friends don't need to be recruited to my little sting operation. I texted back a string of exclamation points like a tipsy ant. At 7:40 p.m., I got another picture. Val again, closer, smiling. The sapphire again. And, oh my heart, my pearl bracelet on her right wrist. My pearls are the color of moonlight. The pearls in that picture had the same slightly off-round sheen I could spot across a dance floor. She might as well have sent me a confession written in glitter. If you're wondering what came over me, it wasn't rage. It was a serene, almost church-like calm. She wanted me confused? Fine, I would be clear.
At 8:15 p.m., I texted Val. Book club is wrapping up. Could you pop back for a minute? I think I did something silly with the alarms. True enough, I had turned something on. The lamps. On my way, she wrote. Of course she was. She lived for opportunities to rescue me from myself. My friends left with hugs and foil-wrapped lemon bars. A bar, not a cookie. I was overruled. Donna stayed, perched on the edge of a dining chair like a hawk dressed as a retiree. At 8:39 p.m., Val's headlights swept my living room. I stood in the foyer, arthritic hip slightly forward, the way my physical therapist taught me. I flipped the switch for the hall lights. The security lamps hummed on, the air taking on a violet wash like a cheap magic trick. Val came through the door, smile prepped. Everything okay, hun? I took 3 steps back to let her cross the threshold. I didn't look at her hands, not yet. The best thing about being a woman my age is I've learned the value of a pause. Oh, I just wanted to make sure the system was set, I said, waving vaguely toward the alarm panel. Would you mind closing the door? I think a moth followed you in. She shut it. Donna came into view behind me, expression neutral, librarian on duty. Sure, Val said, turning to me with that polished concern. Let me just... She reached out, and the world lit up.
I don't mean metaphorically. Her hands went bright, finger to wrist, in a soft, unmistakable glow. Not scary, not radioactive, just Wednesday night glow bowling bright. The kind of glow a pack of teenagers at a roller rink would cheer for. The inside of my front hall looked like a rave attended by Victorians. Val froze. She looked down. She made a sound I'd only heard once before, when I accidentally surprised my cat while she was mid-jump. It was a human noise, but animal adjacent. She cradled her glowing hands like she could cradle the light back into hiding. What is... She swallowed. What did you... Security feature, I said pleasantly. New lamps. They highlight a special compound I put on my jewelry. And as you can see, I let my eyes travel to her sapphire. My sapphire, sparkling like the North Star under the purple wash. It transfers. For a heartbeat, the house listened. Even my refrigerator took a break from humming. Val recovered fast. You can't accuse me of anything, she said, her voice low, the braid pulled tight enough to drum. You're confused, Evelyn. Oh, am I? I asked, equally soft. Then perhaps you should explain why my sapphire ring and my pearl bracelet are attending your cousin's birthday party. They're mine, she said too quickly. Gifts. From whom? Donna asked, stepping forward, arms folded. From Evelyn's jewelry case? Val looked at Donna like she'd materialized out of thin air. This is harassment. I've been nothing but helpful. And I'm sure your cousin loved the sparkle, I said. But here's the thing. That glow on your hands, it doesn't show up unless you touched what I coded this morning. The fake pieces in my case, for instance, they're clean because I coded the real ones, the ones you're wearing. Now, a confession. You expect dramatic television moments to come with a swell of music and a sudden admission of guilt. In real life, it's messier and much more practical. Val didn't swoon. She didn't cry. She went still. So still I could hear her jaw working. She stared at me like if she focused hard enough, the plot might reverse. She wanted my lawyer, she said. You'll want a different employer first, I replied. Your agency will be getting a call in the morning, but right now I'd like you to take off my jewelry. It's mine. Not according to the glow, dear, and not according to the certificate copies my son has in his briefcase. Her eyes flickered toward the kitchen. Briefcase. Bingo! The would-be guardian of my checkbook had been helping herself to the ledger. I am leaving, she announced, and moved to push past me. I stepped aside. I am not foolish. I am, however, prepared. I said,
You may leave after you remove my ring and bracelet and set them on the table, and after I take photos of your hands under these lights. Oh, and after you return whatever else you've swapped." She laughed, a brittle little thing. "You can't prove anything." "On the contrary," Donna said, holding up her phone like a badge, "we just did." And just when she thought she had me backed into a corner, she forgot who she was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Val's eyes moved from me to Donna to the foyer, landing on the front window where the purple light turned the glass into a mirror. She could see herself, braid tidy, face pretty, hands radioactive. "You're crazy," she tried again, but the energy was draining from the word. She started tugging at the bracelet one-handed, the clasp stuck, my brooding little burr right where it always catches on a sweater. She hissed and finally freed it, setting it on the console table with a click. The ring took longer. She twisted, pulled, cursed softly. When it slid off, a pale band marked where it had hugged her finger for exactly 2 hours at a party that now existed in the photographic record of her phone and mine. "Thank you," I said, as calmly as if she'd returned a borrowed Tupperware. "Now, if you don't mind, your bag." "I do mind." "Then the police will mind for you. Up to you." She stared at us, calculating. 2 older women in a house smelling pleasantly of lemon and victory. No yelling, no threats, just inevitability. She might have succeeded if I'd been who she said I was, a forgetful old lady who didn't know a clasp from a clip. But she made a terrible mistake. She mistook quiet for weak.
"Fine," she snapped. She yanked her tote off her shoulder, spilling the contents, wallet, lip balm, a small pouch, onto the table. She snatched the pouch back too fast, so Donna, trained by 1,000 teenage library patrons, put a flat hand on it. Now, Donna said, like a Sunday school teacher who had seen it all and stopped being surprised in 1983. "Open it," I said. "This is illegal," Val muttered, but her voice had lost its confident lilt. She unzipped the pouch. Out slid a small tangle of gold and silver, a few stones winking like they'd been waiting in the dark. My stomach flipped. There was my mother's second pendant, a tiny star she wore to every New Year's Eve and once to jury duty, for luck. There was a thin gold chain from my 20th anniversary, and my breath caught, my grandmother's wedding band, the one I only wore on Christmas because it made me feel like the kind of woman who knew how to make fudge without a recipe. I didn't cry, not because I'm made of steel, but because right then I was busy. "Photos," I said, and Donna clicked away. The hands, the jewelry, the bag, the lamps. Val glared at me, eyes sharp. "You set me up." "No," I said. "I gave you an honest day's wage in my home. I trusted you with my pills and my breakfast and my front door. You set you up." She tried a new tactic. "If you tell your kids, they'll put you in assisted living." She smiled, the ugliest shape I've ever seen on a pretty face. "You know they will." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, and it was the first time I'd called her that without irony. I taught those kids how to read contracts for fun. I taught them to tell the difference between a real friend and someone who draws a map to your savings account. She flinched. "Good. Now," I said briskly, because I am at heart a woman who likes a list, "here's what's going to happen. You will return every item. You will sign a statement acknowledging that you've returned them. I will contact your agency and the police first thing in the morning. I will also contact the families of any clients I suspect you've been similarly helpful with, including the neighbor who recommended you. If you run, these photos will run faster." "You can't." "Can." I nodded toward her shimmering palms of her hands. "You wore the evidence to a party." She looked down one last time. The glow hadn't faded. It would, in time, but not tonight. "Give me a sink. At least let me wash this off." I shook my head. "You can wash at home."
We stood there in that violet-flooded foyer while she used a tissue to hold each piece as if it burned. She listed what she remembered taking, and I corrected her twice, once gently and once not. When she finished, Donna printed the photos in her little portable printer. She is that kind of librarian. And I wrote a simple statement. Val signed. Her signature was small and pinched, a schoolgirl's name on an overdue permission slip. She left without slamming the door. For a long minute, Donna and I stood perfectly still, listening to the quiet reknit itself around us. "Pie?" Donna asked, finally. "Please," I said. "And then I'm calling my kids." We sat at the dining room table, forks and adrenaline, and I called Mark first. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, everything okay?" "Fine," I said, and told him. Not everything. The world will know everything soon enough, but the outline. The glow, the ring, the bracelet, the photos. "I'm coming over," he said. "You don't need to," I started, then stopped. "Yes, come. Sometimes you choose when to be independent. Sometimes you let someone bring you an extra fork." While we waited, Donna and I checked my inventory against the reclaimed pieces. I felt like a paleontologist fitting bones back into a skeleton. Some gaps remained. I made a list. The list would become 3 lists by the morning and a spreadsheet by afternoon. And I slept well for the first time in a week. The next morning, I did what I said I would. Called the agency, called the police, called the neighbor who recommended Val, who, bless her, said, "I knew it. I knew I was missing a brooch." Mark handled the bank. Of course he did. And found 3 test transactions from my account to a digital wallet we didn't recognize, each under the amount that triggers an automatic alert. Clever, but not as clever as a grandmother with a basement full of science fair leftovers.
I don't want you to think this was easy. It wasn't. There is a particular humiliation in being told you're losing your mind when you are, in fact, finding it. There is a particular fury in realizing someone smiled at you while casing your life. But there is also a very particular joy in making the truth undeniable, bright as neon, simple as a switch. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Because as much as I wanted to close the book with a satisfying click right there in my foyer, this was only the beginning. The agency sent a supervisor who tried to steamroll me with sympathy and unfortunate misunderstandings. The police took statements, then took their time. Val got herself a lawyer who called me ma'am with the kind of drawl that pretends to be respect. And tucked into all that was a discovery that made my stomach drop. Val hadn't just been working me, she'd been running a route. 6 elderly clients within a 10-mile radius, all served by the same agency, all with concerns noted in their files about confusion around valuables. I read that phrase aloud and set the paper down like it might bite me. "Confusion around valuables," I said to Donna, and tasted the words like something rotten. Or rather, I corrected myself, confusion caused around valuables. I started calling, and with every call, the story expanded. A missing watch here, a misplaced heirloom there, a woman convinced she'd given her diamond earrings to a grandniece she doesn't have. It was a pattern, tidy as laundry. The nurse was consistent, I'll give her that. The agency was consistent too, in their reluctance to admit they had a problem. They gave me long sentences about privacy and procedures and an internal investigation. I gave them photos of glowing hands and a list of names. We were at a stalemate, framed as a polite conversation. Those are my least favorite. So I did what I do best. I started stitching threads. I called an elder law attorney recommended by my Widows Club. Yes, that's a thing, and yes, we are fierce. I asked very specific questions. I learned words I'd never needed before: breach of fiduciary duty, exploitation, conversion. I asked my attorney about the UV compound. Admissible? He chuckled. "Ma'am, juries love a science trick, especially when it's harmless and visual." He was younger than my kids, but he had the steady voice of someone raised by a grandmother. "Document everything," he said. "I already have," I replied. By midweek, we had a plan. Not a revenge plot, a response. I'm not a movie vigilante. I am a woman with a good pen, a patient friend, and a great deal of righteous energy. Val could keep her lawyer. I would keep the truth. And then the first letter arrived. It came in a creamed envelope, hand-addressed, with the kind of looping cursive you almost don't see anymore. Inside was a note from another of Val's clients, let's call her Margaret, who had heard through the neighbor grapevine what had happened at my house. "I think you're brave, and I think I'm missing things I didn't know I missed." Tucked into the envelope was a photo of Margaret at her 8th grade graduation, wearing a locket that wasn't in her jewelry box anymore. I put the photo on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a smiling pickle and stared at it until the moment shifted from sad to useful. This wasn't just about my sapphire and pearls anymore. This was about a dozen women with lives too easily written off as confused. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Because here's the delicious detail Val didn't see coming. That security compound, it doesn't only cling to skin. It clings to fabric fibers and leather. And in the photos from the party, oh yes, I asked for more, there were not just glowing hands, but faint halos at the fingertips of 2 other attendees hugging Val, and a smudge on the strap of a handbag that looked suspiciously like the tote my neighbor's daughter bought last year. In chemistry, we call that a trail. I wish I could tell you that after the glowing hands show, the agency folded like a cheap lawn chair. They did not. They arrived at my kitchen table in cardigans and concerned faces, placed a branded folder in front of me and said phrases like, "We take allegations very seriously," in the tone of someone apologizing that the soup of the day is tomato instead of bisque. The supervisor's name was Maureen, early 50s, tight smile, a wedding set that said, "He's a dentist," and she opened with, "We're all on the same team here, Evelyn," I asked, and slid the photos of Val's rave-ready hands across the table. "And do your jerseys glow under blacklight?" To her credit, Maureen didn't flinch. She said, "We've spoken to Val, and she's adamant these are her personal items." She even supplied receipts. "From where?" I asked.
She blinked. "A local jeweler." "Wonderful," I said, and I meant it. "Then we'll add the jeweler to the list." Mark sat beside me, working a pin like it owed him money. He'd already moved my accounts to 2-factor authentication and a bank manager who sounded 15 on the phone and knew everything. He didn't say much, but when he did, he used words that made Maureen's smile go brittle. Bond claim, insure notification, fiduciary, statutory damages. He gets that from his father, who once returned a toaster with a 3-page brief and a handshake. Maureen tried a give and tack. "We want to avoid publicity, for your sake." "I'm 68, I said. "I had 2 babies without epidurals and once taught a room of 9th graders about covalent bonds without losing my mind. I'll survive a little publicity." I shifted, slow and deliberate, the way my physical therapist taught me. What I won't survive is being told I'm confused when I'm actually robbed. We ended the meeting with a courtesy that felt like bubble wrap. Soft, protective, and a little suffocating. Maureen promised an internal review. Mark promised letters sent that afternoon. I promised myself a slice of banana bread and a nap I had not earned, but would enjoy anyway. That afternoon, my elder law attorney, a calm man named Aaron with the demeanor of a good librarian, and the wardrobe of a patient funeral director, called. "We can go 3 ways at once," he said. "Police, state regulators, and civil claims.
The police will take their time. That's their nature. Regulators like patterns. And civil claims get people's attention because they tug on wallets. I like patterns. I also like tugging. Then we'll tug, he said, and sent me a checklist that sang to my soul. Dates, names, items, estimated values, corroboration. He was speaking my love language. Documentation. Meanwhile, the grapevine did what it does best. Grew. By Tuesday, my living room looked like a neighborhood committee meeting disguised as a knitting circle. 6 women, 3 husbands, 1 patient son-in-law in a corner with a laptop, and Donna taking attendance like we were due fines if we left early. We went around the room, and the stories. Lord, a missing watch that must have slipped off while gardening, even though the owner hadn't gardened since 2015 when her knees mutinied. A coin collection donated to the church rummage sale by a woman who had never donated anything without a tax receipt. Earrings that supposedly were given to the home aide as a thank you, except the client didn't remember giving them, and her daughter said her mother would rather have donated a kidney. Every time someone said, "I guess I'm just getting forgetful," I set down my pen and said, "No, you're being handled. There's a difference." We made lists. I love a list the way some people love a bubble bath. We mapped Val's schedule, the agency's roster, every missing item, every note in each client file about confusion around valuables. We saw, for the first time, what Maureen didn't want us to see. This wasn't one unscrupulous aide. It was at least one aide and a system that handed her the stage and applauded. The receipts Maureen had mentioned arrived in my inbox like little challenge coins. 3 PDFs, new as morning dew. Val had purchased a sapphire ring, pearl bracelet, and gold pendant from a place I knew. DeLuca & Sons, a small jewelry store downtown wedged between a tailor and a cobbler who still makes keys by hand. Liza's prom dress had been hemmed at that tailor. My husband once broke a heel on those uneven bricks out front, and we ended up laughing so hard we missed our dinner reservation and ate pizza in our church clothes on a bench. It's a nice block. It made me angrier. There were problems with the receipts. First problem, the dates. The purchases were 3 days after my blow show. Second, the descriptions were vague. Lady sapphire ring, pearl bracelet, gold pendant. And not the kind of detailed work an honest jeweler writes when he wants to later tell you, "Look, see this serial number?" Third, no photos attached, though the store's Yelp reviews bragged about detailed appraisals with pictures. I called DeLuca & Sons. A young man answered, polite, cautious. "We do not discuss client purchases," he recited. "I don't discuss my cholesterol with strangers," I replied. "Put on Mr. DeLuca." He did. Mr. DeLuca sounded exactly like a man whose name belongs on a placard, old enough to have learned business before smartphones. He said, "Mrs. Hart, I know your family, your son's shirts, your grandkids' watch batteries. We don't want trouble." I said, "You already have it," and explained plainly what the receipts were being used for. I did not accuse. I simply placed the facts on the table and pushed them forward, like sliding a plate of cookies to a guest. He sighed and said, "Come tomorrow, early, before we open." I went, with Donna as my bouncer and a tote bag of documentation that could stop a small door. Mr. DeLuca unlocked the door himself. Inside smelled like Windex and old velvet, the best kind of jewelry store smell. He closed the blinds, something in his shoulders easing when the street disappeared. "I didn't sell that girl anything," he said without preamble. "She came in with a bracelet to clean, said it was a gift, wanted a quick polish before a party. Cheap metal. I told her it could flake if I did anything to it. She got mad, huffed, left. 2 days later, a man comes in with an envelope, asks me to write up a generic receipt to show his wife what he paid for some gifts. No serial numbers requested, no appraisal wanted, just a slip. He waived cash. I said no. He waived more. I said no again. He left. Then where? I started. Mr. DeLuca reached into his safe and pulled out an old-style receipt book. He must have gone to someone else, he said, or printed our header. We had a break-in last year. Someone took a box of blank older forms. I didn't think. He stopped. I should have thought. Do you have cameras? Donna asked. He did. We watched the footage. There was Val in her braid, letting the door whoosh closed behind her, holding a pouch like it contained 3 beans that might grow a beanstalk. There was the man 2 days later, baseball cap, forgettable gait, the kind that looks like 1,000 other men moving through the world unnoticed. We printed the stills. We left with copies and a promise from Mr. DeLuca to speak to the police. Back home, Mark scanned everything like a human Xerox. Aaron drafted a letter that was both cordial and loaded, the literary equivalent of a smile with teeth. The agency lawyer called. He was young, slick, and trying too hard. Let's not throw around scary words, he said, which always means the scary words are true. We're not throwing them around, I said. We're stacking them neatly. He warned me about defamation. He suggested, so generously, that the agency could comp a month of service if I, tempered my public statements. Son, I said because he sounded baby fresh, my public statements include the words officer and judge. Your coupon doesn't cover that. Mark snorted into his sleeve, which was immature and made me proud. The next day, Liza came by with soup and a hug that made me feel 40 and invincible. She said, I posted a PSA on the neighborhood group without naming anyone. You should see the messages. She showed me dozens of comments from people thanking us for speaking up, a handful hinting at their own odd experiences, a surprising number just saying, good for you, Evelyn. I read every one. I don't care how old you are, being believed is a tonic. 2 nights later, I tried to sleep and couldn't. The party photos kept looping in my head. Val's hands, the faint halos on other hands, the smudge on the purse strap. A smudge. I'd told you about that, didn't I? On the strap, right where your fingers pinched to adjust. The purse looked familiar. Not mine, not Donna's, but someone. Then, at 2 a.m, it clicked. My neighbor's daughter, Kat, with the auburn bob and the tote bag you could spot from orbit. She'd been at the party. She posted a boomerang of confetti on her Instagram. My granddaughter taught me how to watch it without leaving evidence, a hilarious concept I loved instantly. In the boomerang, the strap of the tote flashed under patio lights, and when I paused it just right, the smudge glowed. I texted Donna, "Are you up?" She replied with a single word my granddaughter taught her, always. We called Kat the next morning. She arrived wearing sunglasses the size of soup bowls and a nervous smile. She said, I heard. I was at the party. Val, you know I thought she was legit. She helped my aunt last winter. I didn't like her tone, but... Your tote. May I? She handed it over. I clicked on my kitchen UV bulb. My house was going to look like a bowling alley for a while. I had accepted that. The strap lit with a bluesy haze, the kind that made you want to say, aha, out loud. Kat's mouth opened. What does that mean? She whispered. It means you hugged somebody wearing something from my jewelry box. I said gently. It means she passed the compound from the piece to your bag. Kat exhaled. She hugged everyone. She hugged me when I walked in, like we were long-lost cousins. She hugged my boss. Oh, she frowned. She hugged my friend Miles. He runs estate sales. He had killed it that day on a liquidation. Posted about it like crazy.
Estate sales, I repeated. The 2 words arranged themselves on my kitchen wall in big block letters. Of course. A perfect fence for small, nice things with hazy providence. My aunt gave it to me, no idea where the papers are. Could you ask Miles to stop by? I asked, and gave her the smile my granddaughter calls my grandma bakes cookies while plotting look. It usually gets results. Miles came over that afternoon with a haircut that wanted to be edgy and a heart that wanted to be nice. He carried a little flashlight I recognized, UV, the kind you use to check vintage glass for cracks. We use these at sales sometimes, he said, embarrassed. Helps show flaws. Looks cool.
People buy more if they feel like they're in on a secret. Did you have Val at any of your sales? I asked, as casual as a cat on a sunny step. He paused. She came by last month, with a guy. Baseball cap? I notice caps. Flop sweat tells you a lot. They asked about nostalgia pieces. He did most of the talking, asked if we pay cash. I said we don't buy, we sell. I gave them the card of a guy who buys. He winced. You think... We're collecting threads, I said. Don't tug yourself into a knot yet. He took it well, better than I would have at 28. He gave me the buyer's card, a vintage acquisitions fellow who worked out of a small storefront near the highway, sandwiched between a vape shop and a place that sells lawn flamingos. I know that strip. Everyone does. It's where good intentions go to get discounted. Donna and I went the next day, dressed like two ladies looking for a charming retro brooch. We were both wearing pearls, mine real again, hers inherited, and cardigans that said, "We use coupons." The shop smelled like old pennies and too much cologne. The buyer, his card said Rick in a font that shouted, looked up, did a quick age check, and plastered on a "hello, big sale" smile. "We're downsizing," Donna lied smoothly, and set a small velvet box on the glass. Inside was a ring I bought on QVC in 2002 when insomnia and easy pay almost made me poor. A handsome fake, deliberately so. What do you give for something like this? Rick took out a loop, the way men on TV do when they want to seem important. He examined it, pronounced it a nice little thing, and offered cash that was both low and insulting. We haggled like women in a market who have grandmothers. While he counted bills, I turned on my keychain UV light and accidentally spilled a glimmer on his display case. The edges lit up like he dusted with sugar. He flinched and tried to wipe it off with his wrist. His wrist glowed. "Well, hello." "Party trick," I chirped, like a woman who didn't know what she was doing. "My grandson gave it to me. Makes all the white thread on my clothes light up. Isn't that something?" I leaned in. "Has anyone come by lately with a sapphire that looks like it should belong to me?" "What?" He laughed, and it sounded like a dryer with a quarter in it. No, lady, we don't—" "Save it," Donna said in her librarian voice. "We're not the police. We're worse. We're organized." He deflated one notch, then another. "Look," he said, hands up, "we get walk-ins all the time. People bring stuff, we pay, we resell. We don't ask questions we don't want answers to. That's a policy, not a moral." He shrugged. "Everybody's got to eat. And some of us cook," I replied. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to show me your log of purchases for the past 60 days, or I'm going to connect your inability to keep your glass cases clean with a list of serial numbers that a detective will be interested in." He weighed his options out loud, the way men like him do when they think speaking slowly makes them sound smarter. "I could call my lawyer." "You could. And I could call the fire marshal about the way your back room blocks your exit. Your call." He stared at her, then at me, then at the UV glow on his wrist. "You two are scary," he said, and opened a binder from under the counter, because crooks who think they're not crooks always keep good records until they don't. We copied names, dates, descriptions. A lady's sapphire ring from 2 days ago, purchased cash, no paperwork. A pearl bracelet. Same. A gold star pendant. My mother wore that star to New Year's. I breathed through my nose and did not cry.
"Who brought them?" I asked. He pointed to a notation, Val plus M. He'd written a phone number. Donna took a picture. I thanked him for his cooperation in a tone that made him want to scrub his cases with bleach and his conscience with a book on ethics. When we left, Donna said, "Val plus M. M for man with the baseball cap?" "M for mistake," I said. "Hers." We gave Detective O'Neill the binder copies. She looked like Christmas had come in October. "This helps," she said. "Cash is king until the king starts keeping ledgers." That night, Aaron filed motions I don't pretend to fully understand. He asked a judge for a temporary restraining order that prohibited the agency and Val from disposing of any property or contacting us directly.
He also filed a preservation notice for the party photos. It turns out the law does, in fact, care when you glow like a Jackson Pollock under a lamp. He prepared a complaint for civil claims on behalf of 4 of us, with the others to follow. He said, "We'll add the store and the buyer if we need to. This is a chain. The law hates chains when they're used to drag people." Midweek, Maureen tried again. This time, she brought the agency's owner, a man in a 2 blue suit who introduced himself with a handshake that left my hand damp and unimpressed. "Let's be reasonable," he said, like reason was furniture he could sell me. "There's a lot of misunderstanding here." I have a filing cabinet of understanding and a detective who's very good at making the misunderstood feel seen. He switched to flattery. "Evelyn, you're obviously a very intelligent woman. Perhaps you can help us get to the bottom of this." I smiled. Finally, we're speaking the same language. We asked for their incident logs, their employee roster, the names of all clients who had notes about confusion around valuables. We asked for Val's schedule, the names of her supervisors, the internal emails referencing the glowing hands event. I know they wrote some. People cannot resist emailing about a story like that. We asked for their insurer's contact. They gave us a lot of "we'll get back to you" and "our counsel will review." Mark recorded the meeting with a tiny device the size of a cough drop. I love that boy. Now, this is where I need you to stick with me, because the next part is the kind of thing that makes you want to stand up and cheer in your own kitchen. The buyer's log listed one more item of interest: a vintage brooch with seed pearls, sold the week before to a woman whose initials were FR. The notation said, "Return?" with a question mark and a date to follow up, like something had gone sideways. I recognized the description. Margaret, the woman who'd sent me her 8th grade photo, had lost a brooch like that, a dainty thing with seed pearls shaped like a crescent moon. I called her. "Do you mind a field trip?" I asked. She didn't. We met at the buyer's shop with Detective O'Neill this time, who does an impression of "I'm just browsing," while also being a living subpoena. Rick tried to puff up. O'Neill gave him a look I hope to perfect by Christmas. He produced the brooch from a little tray in the back like a rabbit out of a sad hat. Margaret put a hand to her mouth. "That's mine," she breathed. O'Neill photographed it, logged it, called it potential evidence, and took it into custody pending proof. Margaret went home and came back with a photo of her wearing it to her 50th anniversary party, her dress the same blue as the sky that day, the brooch pinned just so. It wasn't a serial number, but it was pretty good in a world that too often relies on "trust me." We were on a roll. We found 2 more items in his case that matched our list. My neighbor's missing locket with a tiny scratch where her toddler grandson once tasted it, and a thin gold chain that belonged to Donna's late sister. We had a photo of her wearing it at a parade. O'Neill took those too. Rick's bravado melted like butter on July asphalt. He started talking in complete sentences that included verbs like regret. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The agency, sensing the wind change, sent a new emissary, their insurer's adjuster. She was efficient and had a haircut that said she used graphs in meetings. She said, "We're evaluating exposure. We'd like to make you whole." "Whole," I repeated. "Whole is not a check. Whole is my things back and a policy change and an apology that doesn't sound like it was written by a robot trying to pass 8th grade English." She actually smiled. I respect that. But on the check question, numbers help people apologize.
We gave her numbers, not inflated, not punitive. Real appraised values from Mr. DeLuca for what he could confirm, fair market comps for what we couldn't. She whistled, low. "You all have nice taste," she said. "We all have long lives," I corrected. "Nice taste is what you build when you care for things."
She nodded and left. Aaron told us, "That's good. Adjusters don't hum for fun." We were getting somewhere. The next twist came courtesy of technology and a bored teenager. My grandson, who views the world through lenses and edits, offered to clean up the party photos for us. I said yes, because if there's anything I trust more than a retired chemist with UV powder, it's a 14-year-old with time between homework and bed. He stabilized the shaky videos, brightened frames, and, this is important, noticed a reflection in a patio door. In the reflection, our baseball cap man was clear. Not a perfect face, but enough. A nose, a jaw, a shirt logo. He froze the frame and handed me the printout like a treasure map. Miles, the estate sale boy, looked once and said, "That's Manny. He helps haul for me sometimes. Freelance. I thought he was a good guy." He looked crushed. Growing up is learning that some men you think are good with heavy boxes are also good at bad decisions. Detective O'Neill went hunting. Manny, it turned out, had a record, but small stuff. Unpaid tickets, a shoplifting charge in 2009. More importantly, he had an address that wasn't far from Val's. She'd put him under M in her contacts. O'Neill got a warrant. Don't ask me how fast, I'm just grateful. And paid Manny a visit. He sang. Not opera, but in a tone that said, "It wasn't my idea, I was just the ride." He talked about picking up gifts and helping a friend and not knowing where the items came from. He gave up a storage unit number with the resignation of a man who knows the jig isn't up so much as being folded and put away. I didn't go to the storage unit. I'm bold, not foolish. But O'Neill did, and she called me after, voice buzzing. She said, "We found cases. A few empty, a few not. And this will make your day. We found a little bottle of what looks like your compound." You? I sat down. How? She said, "It wasn't a bag with cleaning supplies. I think they tried to see if they could remove it." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Dawn dish soap and hot water won't get you out of this one," I said. "Also, tell them they needed acetone, patience, and a time machine." By the end of the week, Val had been suspended pending investigation. Manny had been detained pending charges. The agency had been contacted by regulators. Our adjuster had been authorized to negotiate, and my kitchen had been returned to smelling like lemon and coffee instead of adrenaline. You might think that would be enough, but the insult of "you're losing your memory" had taken root in me like a weed that needed pulling fully. I wanted more than my pieces back. I wanted the path behind Val salted so no one would follow it again. That meant policy, not just punishment. We met with the councilwoman I like because she once brought homemade brownies to a budget meeting. She listened, took notes, and said, "We can draft a city ordinance requiring agencies to report patterns of missing property within 30 days to a local elder protection unit. We can require signed inventories when caregivers start and end shifts where valuables exist. We can require UV checkpoints if you want to get cheeky. I like cheeky, but I like enforceable better." She grinned. Me too. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at a hearing. I said yes, and later wondered what on earth I'd wear. You can't talk about stolen pearls without wearing pearls. That's just manners. Aaron advised caution with the press. "Let the filings do the talking," he said. But my Widows Club, bless them, started a whisper campaign. The wholesome kind, where whispers turn into donations to an elder legal fund and casseroles delivered to people testifying and rides offered to appointments. We are a force. You don't see us until you need us. Then we're everywhere with clipboards and snacks. The agency's lawyer filed for a restraining order to keep me from harassing their staff and damaging their reputation. The judge, a woman my age with hair like mine and eyes like her mother's, read the papers, flicked through the photos, and said, "I'm denying this. I suggest the agency redirect its energy towards compliance." I wrote that line on a Post-it and stuck it to my fridge.
The last surprise of the week came with the mail. A padded envelope, no return address, postmarked 2 towns over. Inside, wrapped in a bar napkin from a place called The Cask, were my mother's emerald studs. No note, just the studs, heavy as conscience. I turned them in my hands, felt the weight I'd known since I was 20, and sat at my kitchen table with a feeling I can only describe as righteous sadness. Somewhere, someone decided to be a person that day. Maybe Manny, maybe someone else. I put the studs in a dish and put the dish in the safe and stood still until my heartbeat felt like mine again. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Because we weren't done. The agency had a policy that smelled like neglect. Manny had a storage unit that smelled like fear. And Val had a cousin with a birthday party where hands glowed, and a timeline that did not suit her receipts. There were more clients to contact, more items to return, more apologies to refuse until they were baked properly. And tucked between all that was one more thread, the supervisor's emails. Someone on the inside called me from a blocked number and whispered, "Check the notes. They add confusion after a complaint, not before." Then she hung up. A whistle had been blown. I wrote the time down on my legal pad, underlined it twice, and called Aaron. The whisper about the notes, they add confusion after a complaint, not before, hit me like a caffeine jolt straight to the spine. Because that wasn't sloppy. That was scaffolding. It meant someone had been building a paper trail to make us look unreliable before we even knew we needed to be believed. I brewed coffee strong enough to bench press and called Aaron. He listened, didn't interrupt, and finally said, "If that's true, it's a gift with a bow on top. It turns an oops into a pattern. But we need proof that lives outside your kitchen." Proof I have. I just needed access. "Subpoena," I said, proud to be the sort of grandmother who can say the word without spitting it on her blouse. "Working on it," he replied. "In the meantime, ask for your file. You're allowed under state law." So I did. I called Maureen, put on my softest help me help you voice, and asked for a copy of my client notes. She said she'd email the pertinent parts. I said I wanted the whole pie, not just a slice. She said their policy was to redact internal deliberations. I said my policy was to prefer lemon meringue, but I'll accept key lime if the crust holds. We compromised on everything not subject to attorney-client privilege. I do love how that phrase makes people stand up straighter. The file arrived as a PDF large enough to need its own zip code. I printed it because I am a tactile animal when the stakes are high. Donna came over with highlighters and a tin of snickerdoodles. We laid the pages out on my dining table in chronological order, then added sticky notes like flags at a parade. Here's what we found. 3 incident notes about me. 1 claiming I confused doses. I did not. 1 claiming I left burner on low. Also false. The burner was warm because Val had warmed her takeout, which she did often enough for my microwave to learn her name. And 1 suggesting I'd accused Aide of misplacing jewelry, then found it later. That one felt like a prequel to the gaslight they were rehearsing. Each of those notes appeared the day after I made a request. Ask Val not to rearrange my pantry. Ask for receipts for groceries she picked up. Ask why my pill organizer had 2 Tuesday tabs. The timestamps were like drumbeats. My question, their note. Then came the glow night. The entry for that day was a novella. Client became agitated, turned on unusual lighting, made inappropriate accusations regarding personal property. Safety plan reviewed. Safety plan for whom? I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Donna, bless her, has the patience of a librarian who's trained 1,000 new volunteers to shelve mysteries under M for murder, she wrote. She drafted a chart that matched my calls and texts to their notes. It was a waltz and not a graceful one. I emailed the chart to Aaron with a subject line that read, "Your bow on top." He called within an hour. He said, "This is gold. They're manufacturing capacity questions to cover loss events. I'll add it to the regulator packet and our motion for expedited discovery." While Aaron lawed, I did what I do. Crowdsourced truth over coffee. The other clients requested their files. One woman,
June, in her 70s with a voice like a cello, read hers and went so still I thought she'd fallen asleep. They wrote, "I refuse to bathe," she said finally, eyes bright. "I have a walk-in tub and a daily alarm that sings Moon River. I must have asked for my ring back that day." She closed her eyes. I remember asking, and I remember feeling silly for asking. That's the worst of it, you know? Not the missing gold, the missing certainty. The way doubt tipped our bones like a bad heel on a good shoe. The councilwoman, brownies, and backbone scheduled a public hearing for 2 weeks out. "Bring your visuals," she said. "People vote with their eyes." I smiled like a woman who owns 2 security bulbs and knows her angles. In the days before the hearing, the world got very busy. Manny's storage unit yielded more than trinkets, duplicate jewelry boxes with swapped fakes nestled inside. Detective O'Neill called it a starter kit for a traveling show. The DA's office asked me to sit for a formal interview. They put a recorder on the table. I put my hands flat on the wood and told the story without the jokes. Sometimes humor is a shield. Sometimes you lay it down and let the facts stand there, blunt and heavy. Meanwhile, the adjuster slid an offer across Aaron's desk that would make a frugal woman blink. Full replacement value for the items we could price, a discretionary fund for unaccounted distress, and a non-admission of liability letter that might as well have been typed in invisible ink. Aaron slid it back with polite edits. Admission of policy failure, binding commitments to change X, Y, and Z, and restitution to a pooled fund for any similarly situated clients to have appraisals and security upgrades, locks, cameras, even my beloved UV lamps if they wanted them. "Ambitious," the adjuster said. "I'm retired," I replied through him. "What else do I have to do but be ambitious?" On Thursday, I drove to DeLuca & Sons with Liza to pick up sworn appraisals for the pieces we recovered and fair market estimates for those still missing. Mr. DeLuca polished my mother's emerald studs with the tenderness of a man who's watched a lot of vows. He said, "I'm sorry," again, for the broken receipts he never wrote. "I should have called the police when that man waved cash. You're calling now and polishing like an apology." I put the studs in my ears and caught my own eye in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't 20 or even 48. She was 68, soft around the edges and steel down the center. "Hello, you," I told her. "We're not done." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. The night before the hearing, my granddaughter helped me practice my statement. Short, punchy, and with a kicker, she coached, sounding like a YouTube producer in a ponytail. We timed it. We tweaked it. We added one demonstration, at her insistence. "People will talk about it," she said. Eyes alight. I slept in rollers like it was prom night. The next morning, I wore my grandmother's wedding band on a chain and my own pearls. Not to brag, but to say, "These are mine." Donna wore a blazer that could punch its way through a glass door. Mark stood behind me like a human exclamation point. Liza squeezed my arms so hard I thought she'd leave a mark, which I'd wear like a badge. The council chamber smelled like old wood and earnestness. Local hearings have a special flavor. A Boy Scout troop on a field trip, 3 men who come to every meeting to complain about potholes, and a woman who knits aggressively while nodding. We signed in. We sat. The agency had brought a lawyer and a PR woman with hair like a news anchor. The PR woman smiled at me like we were distant cousins. I gave her the expression I reserve for people who call me dear and then list reasons I should sit down. The councilwoman called us up. I spoke simply. "My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 68. I'm a retired chemist. I hired a home health aide after a fall. She stole from me. The agency tried to write confusion onto my skin like a tattoo. I added a light. I gestured to the diagram my grandson had printed, the foyer under UV, Val's glowing hands, and the ring flashing like a siren. I am not confused. I am mad, and I'm precise." Then came the kicker. I plugged in a UV bulb the councilwoman had okayed and held up a grocery tote I'd rubbed with my benign little compound that morning.
Caregivers touch what we love, I said. If agencies can't protect us, we will protect ourselves. But I shouldn't have to turn my home into a science experiment to be believed when I say my things are missing. I flicked the switch. The room washed purple. The tote strap glowed. You could hear the Boy Scouts inhale like we'd just made a foam volcano. The knitting woman stopped knitting. Donna followed me with charts, June with dignity, Margaret with her brooch photo, and Rick, the buyer, under subpoena, with a face like a man who'd bitten a lemon and found a seed. Detective O'Neill spoke last, crisp and clean. We believe there is a pattern of coordinated theft, laundering through secondary buyers, and post hoc narrative building to discredit complainants, she said, as if reading a grocery list. We encourage the council to consider mandatory reporting and inventory standards for agencies. The agency's lawyer stepped up, all "we care deeply" and "isolated incident" and "ongoing cooperation." The PR woman tried to sell training enhancements like she was pitching a new salad dressing. The councilwoman thanked them and said, "We'll be in touch," which we all know means "put your helmet on." After the hearing, a reporter asked for a comment. Aaron had warned me to be careful, so I kept it wholesome. "Tell your grandparents you believe them and go check their jewelry boxes," I said. The video ran that night anyway, our purple room and all. I received 3 calls within an hour, all from women who started with, "I thought it was just me." The next morning, our adjuster called Aaron with a new tone. "My client will accept policy changes A through D," she said, "and fund the appraisal and security pool. We cannot admit liability for what the aide did outside the scope of employment, but we can admit we failed to prevent patterns." I know legalese, but I also know when someone's putting money where their mouth used to be. Aaron said, "We'll draft language," which is lawyer for "we've got you." Meanwhile, O'Neill's team brought Manny in again, this time with the reflection printout and a friendly nudge about accessory charges. He upgraded from humming to singing. He gave them text messages from Val, "Got tonight? Rich lady, easy," and from a number saved as R that matched our buyer's phone. Cash okay, no queues. He also gave up screenshots of agency shift calendars Val had photographed, so she'd know when clients were alone and when sons with briefcases might drop by. That one made my stomach go hot. Planning, not impulse. They'd marked me as confused on paper and convenient on a calendar. Aaron looped in the state attorney general's elder protection unit. Say what you want about government, when the right office latches on, it can bite. Subpoenas started flying like seed in March. The agency's owner, blue suit, damp handshake, went from smooth to splotchy. Maureen resigned to spend more time with family, which I hope includes a good mirror. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. Now, because life loves timing, the day we were finalizing the ordinance language, mandatory incident reporting, verified inventories, client-accessible notes, I received a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, tight and scared. "My name is Valeria. I was Val's supervisor at her last agency 3 towns over before this job. They didn't check references. She had complaints there. I filed them. They buried them. I have copies. I'll talk if you promise I won't lose my job." She left a number. I called Aaron. He called O'Neill. We called her back together on speaker, 3 adults and a phone on a plate, like we were serving justice for dessert. Her story was a sad little echo. Missing items, confusion notes, families gently rebuffed, complaints resolved with reassignment. She'd saved emails because, in her words, I could feel something wrong, but she needed her paycheck. I did not judge her. The world runs on people who choose to stay even when it stinks because rent is due on Wednesday. She sent the emails. They sang harmony with ours. Aaron stapled them to a motion. O'Neill attached them to a probable cause affidavit. The AG's office added them to an interagency memo that used phrases like systemic failure and pattern of concealment. The agency tried one last squeeze, a letter to my house that said, in legal snow, "Cease disparaging us or we'll sue." I stood at my kitchen counter, read it, laughed, and penned a note in the margin, "See you at the hearing." Donna took a photo of me holding the letter, and we put it on the Widows Club bulletin board under a magnet shaped like a very unimpressed owl. The civil case moved faster than I expected, because money can hear a footstep from a mile away. We got dates for depositions. "They'll try to rattle you," Aaron said. "Answer only what they ask. Silence is not rudeness, it's strategy." I practiced saying, "Could you repeat the question?" in the bathroom mirror. The woman who looked back at me didn't need to practice. She'd been answering questions for 68 years. Deposition day was a fluorescent-lit marathon with bad coffee and a court reporter whose nails were art. The agency's lawyer asked me if I ever misplaced my keys. Yes. Had I ever forgotten an appointment? Also yes. Did I ever drink wine with dinner? Yes, and occasionally 2 glasses when Liza's lasagna demanded it. He smiled like he found my Achilles heel in a Costco. "So you agree you're not perfect?" "I agree I'm human," I said, "and that my imperfection does not authorize theft." He tried to make the UV compound sound like witchcraft. "You created a chemical trap." I applied a museum-grade tracer used in conservation labs and educational settings, I replied, sounding exactly like myself teaching 9th graders. "It is non-toxic, non-destructive, and widely available. I used it to show transfer, not to hurt anyone." He flushed. "And you admit you attempted to entrap my client by inviting her back to your home while you had these lights on." "I invited her back because she was on my payroll and I needed help. The lights are fixed to my ceiling. If your client was wearing my bracelet, that's on her wrist, not my fixtures." The court reporter suppressed a smile so hard her nails trembled. We left with sore backs and straight spines. Aaron squeezed my shoulder in the hallway. "You were a brick," he said. "I prefer to think of myself as tempered glass, transparent and tough." That night, I made soup and put on an old movie and tried to let my shoulders drop. The phone rang. It was the councilwoman. "The ordinance passed unanimously," she said, not bothering to hide her glee. "Reporting, inventories, client access, insurer notifications, the whole package, and a small city fund for security upgrades at qualifying addresses, seated by, guess who?" Let me guess. A certain agency's insurer who suddenly appreciates community relations. "Bingo," she laughed. "Also, a local jeweler donated a free appraisal day once a quarter. The paper will love that." I hung up and let myself cry. Not because I was sad, because sometimes the world says yes in a way that sounds like your mother's voice. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Because for all the progress, the last domino hadn't fallen. The truth about who suggested the confusion notes, who crafted the receipts, and who connected Val to buyers like Rick and haulers like Manny. I suspected a hub. It's never just one greedy pair of hands. It's a table with someone serving pieces and someone washing dishes. We had the dishwasher. We needed the maitre d'. Then a message arrived on the Widows Club email from a throwaway account. Check staff Slack. Search gloves. That's all it said. Donna and I stared at it like it might sprout legs. "Gloves?" she asked. "In kitchens, gloves are for raw chicken or for hiding fingerprints. Let's see if the subpoena fairy will bring us a present." Aaron filed an emergency motion to compel production of internal messaging. The judge, my gray-haired soul sister, granted it with a line I now have taped to my spice rack. "Sunshine disinfects."
The dump arrived 2 days later, a digital mountain. Liza's friend, who does data stuff for a living, which I translate as magic, parsed it overnight on her laptop while eating an alarming amount of Twizzlers.
She found it. Oh, did she find it? Threads where supervisors, plural, told aides to wear gloves near valuables because older skin tends to leave oil smudges, which is true in the way a fox tells the hen he's tidying straw. Messages about documenting confusion proactively after a family called to ask about a missing watch. A DM where someone sent Val a photo of a good buyer business card, Rick's, the font unmistakable, with the note, if she wants to gift you something for your help, send her there. Don't take it. I could feel the PR woman's ghost fingers all over that sentence. And then the gem. A joke from a supervisor I didn't know. If it ain't nailed down, it's a donation. Followed by Val's reply, LOL, gloves on. You know that strange, quiet your house gets right before a thunderstorm? That fell over my living room while we read. Then Donna, gentle Donna, said in the calm voice of a woman who has seen teenagers carve curse words into library tables, let's print these. We gave the packet to O'Neill and the AG's office. The criminal case shifted from Val and Manny to Val, Manny, and friends. The civil case widened. The insurer's adjuster, who had been a practical adversary, became a pragmatic ally. We'll fund a compliance monitor, she said, for 2 years. This is ugly. I appreciated her candor. Ugly is easier to fix when you call it by its name. Finally, we scheduled a mediated settlement conference. Neutral ground, a retired judge in a sweater vest, lukewarm coffee, and pastries that knew better days. On one side, me, 3 other plaintiffs, Aaron, and a quiet phalanx of adult children with laptops. On the other, the agency owner, Marine's replacement, 2 lawyers, the adjuster, sensible shoes, and a PR consultant whose pen clicked when she got nervous. Detective O'Neill wasn't there. This was civil, but I could feel her ghost sternness on my shoulder. The judge listened, summarized, and leaned back. I've been doing this a long time, he said. When a story makes me want to stand up and walk around the block, it's because something is rotten. This is rotten. Let's talk repair. We presented our terms, not just money, though, yes, money, because replacement value is how you tell the world a grandmother's bracelet was not just shiny, it was a stake. But also, full admission of policy failure, audited changes, a hotline for clients that routes outside the agency, a fund for security upgrades, quarterly public reports, and letters, real ones, signed by a human, apologizing for labeling us confused when we were in fact correct. The agency balked at admission. We held firm. The judge rubbed a sweater vest and said, "You can't fix what you don't name." They huddled. They whispered. The PR pen clicked like a metronome. The adjuster said something that made the owner go pale and then pink. The blue suit looked less expensive under fluorescent lights. Finally, they returned. "We can agree," the lead lawyer said carefully, "to a statement acknowledging that our practices failed to protect clients and contributed to a climate of dismissal. We will not admit criminal wrongdoing." "That's the state's business," Aaron said smoothly. "We're here for the climate." He added 2 lines about training that isn't just a slide deck, and an independent ombudsperson with power to make trouble. They signed, we signed. The judge looked pleased, like a man whose tomatoes finally took. I went home not triumphant yet, but settled. A step, a big one. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Because while the ink dried, the criminal case rolled on. Val made bail.
Of course she did. She walked out in sunglasses big enough to hide a conscience and said nothing. Manny pled to a lesser charge and agreed to testify. Ricks closed his shop for renovations, a sign I will never not laugh at. The AG's office prepared an announcement. The council readied a press release. The Widows Club prepared sandwiches because justice is hungry work. And me? I set my jewelry case back on my dresser, real pieces nested on velvet that now were a story. I kept one UV bulb in the foyer, partly for security, mostly as a nightlight that reminds me, I am not confused. I am lit.
There was one last thing you should know before we head into the finale. When I was packing a box for the city's appraisal and security day, I found an envelope in the back of my safe labeled in my husband's handwriting, for when needed. Inside was a list of numbers, a broker we once used, a lawyer friend we hadn't called in years, and, would you believe it, a retired judge who taught my husband's Sunday school back when boys wore ties to church. At the bottom, in his blocky print, "You always were the smart one. Use this if someone forgets." I pressed that paper to my chest. It felt like a benediction. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. 2 days after the settlement conference, the Widows Club fed an army and the city fed a headline. The Attorney General's Elder Protection Unit stood at a podium in a beige room that tried to be serious and succeeded mostly at being beige, and said the words I'd been wanting to hear since the moment my sapphire went weightless in my hand. We are bringing charges. Not just against Val and Manny, against the agency for failure to report, against the owner for obstruction, and against unnamed co-conspirators for forging documentation and trafficking stolen property. I watched the live stream at my kitchen table with Donna, a plate of oatmeal cookies between us like sandbags. The AG laid it out in tidy bullet points. The confusion notes added after complaints, the doctored receipts on stolen letterhead, the resale through secondary buyers, and, my favorite, the museum-grade tracer that visually connected stolen items to handlers. He even called it elegant. I blushed like a girl getting her corsage. "Elegant," Donna repeated, delighted. "Put that on a t-shirt." They took 2 questions. A reporter asked if this was an isolated incident. The AG said, with the caution of a man who likes his cases to stick, "We are looking at additional agencies." Translation: everybody who wrote confusion like a spell just sat up straighter in their conference chairs. By afternoon, my phone was a parade. "Mark, proud of you." Liza, a string of heart emojis she would deny sending in front of her children. The councilwoman, "Press wants a quote." Aaron, "Do not give the press a quote." My grandson, "Grandma, you're on Reddit." He showed me, grinning, the clip of the UV lamps flicking on, my foyer washing purple, Val's hands shining like a cautionary tale. The caption said, "Local grandma goes full CSI and I want to be her when I grow up." My granddaughter threatened to put it on a t-shirt. I told her to keep the font tasteful. The next morning, there was a tap, tap, tap at my door. I half expected a chorus of reporters. Instead, it was Mr. DeLuca, hat in hand, a cloth bundle tucked under his arm. "For you," he said, and when I unwrapped it, I found a velvet tray mat and a small brass plaque that read, "Heart Test, applied with love. If the Smithsonian can name a technique, so can we." I laughed so hard, I had to put a hand on the counter. I told him, "Don't encourage me, I'll start a line of lamps." He sobered. What you did, it was kind. Don't let anyone call it sneaky. You gave people their certainty back." He left before I could cry on his good coat. That afternoon, Aaron called with a quiet little bombshell. He said, "Discovery gave us the emails from the last agency, the one 3 towns over where Vel's old supervisor, Valeria, had tried to raise flags. You're going to want to sit." I did, obedient for once. He said, "The owner's brother-in-law was an investor in a vintage acquisitions partnership. Name sound familiar?" I said, "Rick." The syllable sour. He said, "Rick. On paper, it's clean, but the money moved like a shell game, store to partnership to a different LLC that then donated to, wait for it, the agency's annual Caregiver Excellence Fund."
I stirred my coffee like it had offended me. I said, they built a circle. Take from one pocket, launder through a handshake, pat themselves on the back. And they picked the wrong grandma to draw a circle around. He's a good man. He knows how to throw me a line. The arraignment came on a gray Monday that smelled like damp wool. I wore my pearls and my grandmother's wedding band on a chain under my blouse, a private kind of armor. The courtroom was cold enough to keep butter. Val sat at the defense table in a blazer that tried very hard. She didn't look at me. Manny did once, from under his lashes, then looked away like the sun hurt. The owner wore a suit that cost too much to sweat in, and he sweated anyway. The charges were read. Words I'd only read in articles were said out loud. Exploitation, theft by deception, conspiracy, falsification of business records, obstruction. Their lawyers pled not guilty, as they do. The judge, my gray-haired sister in spirit, set dates and set tones. If you've never watched a system that's tried to pretend it was a polite misunderstanding, be treated like the thing it is, I cannot recommend it enough. It's a moral chiropractic adjustment. After, in the hallway, Val's attorney approached Aaron. Off the record, he said, which always means, please don't use this against me later, if we considered a plea, criminal is not my sandbox, Aaron said, but my clients expect restitution and reform. He nodded towards me, like I was a weather system, and respect.
The lawyer looked at me, like a man who'd stepped in something, and was now trying to identify it. You set her up, he said, like that might shame me. I set a lamp, I corrected, perfectly pleasant. She put my bracelet on. He opened his mouth, closed it, and joined his client, who was trying not to meet the eyes of 3 different grandmothers. We went home. We ate tuna melts. I fell asleep in my chair with the book club novel face down on my chest and woke with the plot printed backward on my cheek. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Because here's the twist I saved for the end, the one that made me swear softly in my pantry where the cat couldn't hear. Val wasn't only after jewelry. The slack dump, gloves and all, had a thread buried like a worm in good soil. A supervisor asked, "Any updates on the guardianship referrals?" Family balked on one, needed doc note to support incapacity. Someone with a title replied, "Dr. M is friendly. He'll sign if there's patterns in notes." Then, like someone tucking your hair behind your ear so they can pick your pocket, another message, "If families can't manage, agency can refer to our trusted fiduciary partners. Keeps them safe. Winky face." My skin went cold. Power of attorney by pattern. Probate pathways paved with adjectives. It wasn't just theft of things. It was the blueprint for stealing lives. I called Aaron. He didn't swear. That's not his type. He said, very steadily, "We need to alert the court's guardianship oversight and the medical board. Now." We did. The AG's office, which had been eating its vegetables all week, suddenly got dessert. Guardianship fraud is not a phrase you trot out lightly, but the pattern was there. Confusion notes preceding capacity evaluations, a doctor whose signature appeared on half of the referrals, a fiduciary firm that shared a post office box with the agency's accountant. It wasn't everyone. It never is. But it was enough to redraw the map in thicker lines. The doctor, when the spotlight rolled his way, retired so fast his closed sign squeaked. The fiduciary firm posted a statement that said a lot of nothing in a very serious font. The court instituted a temporary pause on any guardianship petitions originating from the agency, pending independent evaluation. 3 families who'd been railroaded into handing over decision-making got hearings. 2 got their authority back with apologies, and 1 got their daughter appointed instead of a stranger in a shiny tie. I sat in my kitchen and held my coffee like a sacrament. This was bigger than pearls. This was dignity.
Val's lawyer called Aaron a week later with the tone of a man who had finally found the end of his rope. He said, "We're prepared to talk global resolution." Criminal was the state's play, but civil could be wrapped if the numbers and words were right. We met in the same bland conference room, with the same tired pastries and a different air. The terms, when they came together, were the kind of thing you read twice to make sure you didn't imagine them. Money for the named plaintiffs, replacement value, and then some, with an additional fund for any client who could substantiate loss in the last 4 years. A formal apology letter, signed by the owner, not the team, acknowledging that our documentation practices created a climate in which legitimate concerns were dismissed, and our supervision failed to prevent and, in some cases, enabled harm. A 2-year independent monitor with authority to audit notes, interview clients, and yank licenses if foot-dragging returned. Retired Judge Sunday School, yes, my husband's old teacher, agreed to serve as the ombudsperson, which pleased me, like a poem. Mandatory reporting to the city unit and the AG. The appraisal and security program fully funded, with a dedicated number seniors could call for help installing cameras or, yes, UV bulbs. And a promise, legally binding, to provide every client or their chosen family member full, unredacted access to their notes within 48 hours of request. Sunshine, bottled. We insisted on one more thing. I said, this isn't just about theft. It's about the word confused being used like a weapon. We want a training module designed by seniors, not about seniors.
The PR pen stopped clicking. The adjuster smiled, just a little. "We can fund that," she said. "Write it." So we did. Donna, me, June with the walk-in tub, Margaret with her brooch, the councilwoman with the brownies. We sat in a library room that smelled like good paper and wrote a training we would have wanted to take. We called it Respect is a Procedure. We included a section titled Words Matter, wherein confused was described as an observation, not a diagnosis, to be tendered with specificity and never used as a shield after a complaint. We included the heart test as a case study, not the chemistry, but the idea. Verify, don't gaslight, ask twice, check once, document truthfully, never mock. The agency rolled it out because the monitor would close their doors if they didn't. 2 other agencies asked to license it. The councilwoman grinned and said, "We'll charge a nominal fee and put it in the fund." The criminal case didn't end with a thud, it ended with signatures. Manny pled to facilitation and got probation plus community service at our legal clinic's appraisal day, under supervision and without touching anything shiny. Rick pled to trafficking stolen property, surrendered his business license, and made a donation large enough to make the AG's eyes relax. The owner pled to obstruction and falsification, a tidy little stack, and paid fines that made his blue suit look cheaper. Val pled to exploitation and theft by deception. She took a deal. The DA dropped a few counts in exchange for a plea on the rest and cooperation on the guardianship angle. She stood, voice like sand, and admitted in public that she'd worn my bracelet, my ring, my life for an evening. The judge, my sister, sentenced her to prison time and restitution. As she was led away, Val looked at me for the first time since the night of the glow. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just held her gaze with the steadiness of a woman who knows her own name. After, outside the courthouse, a reporter asked if I had any advice for other seniors. Yes, I said. Write down where you put your things, tell your people when something feels off, ask for your records, and if someone calls you confused, ask them to explain what exactly you're supposed to be confused about. I paused. Also, I added, because I am me, consider interesting lighting. He laughed. The clip played that night.
My grandson made it a ringtone. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Because the play wasn't just in courtrooms and council chambers. It was in kitchens. The appraisal and security day drew a line around the block. Women and men with jewelry boxes, photo albums, and more than anything, stories. A volunteer checked names off a list. Mr. DeLuca set up a folding lamp at a magnifier like a magician at a children's party. Donna ran the copier. The retired judge stamped approvals like a benevolent DMV. We cataloged, we fixed clasps, we wrote values, we took photos and printed 2 sets, one for you, one for your kid who always says he'll come take a look soon. We rubbed a tiny smear of my compound on the underside of a brooch or the inside of a ring if they asked, and handed out little UV keychain lights with a sticker that said, "Shine kindly." A woman named Ruth brought a locket with a baby tooth in it, hers, from 1948. "It's silly," she said, embarrassed. "It's not worth anything." We wrote "priceless" in the notes and put a star next to it. Ruth cried and then laughed and then told us the story of the day she pulled that tooth by tying it to a doorknob. I have never loved a room more. The agency sent flowers when the ordinance passed. I sent them back with a note that said, "Send copies of your new policy instead." They did. It was decent. The monitor made it better. 2 other aides invited me to speak at their training day. I told them the same thing I told the council. Respect is a procedure. When I finished, one of the younger aides, barely more than a girl, raised her hand. "My last job told me to call clients sweetie so they'd feel comfortable. I think it made them feel small. What should I say instead?" I smiled. "Their name," I said. "Always start with their name." Val wrote a letter from prison. Don't roll your eyes. I didn't show it to the press, and I'm not telling you what it was in. Some things are private, even now. I'll say this. She had a mother once. We all did. I wrote back once, short. I don't know if forgiveness is a switch or a dimmer, but I know this. I didn't coat the envelope in anything.
Weeks turned to months. The Widows Club added legal hotline right under book exchange on the bulletin board. The councilwoman got reelected. The AG sent me a thank you certificate that I put in a drawer because certificates make me itchy. The video of the glow went quiet in the feed, replaced by cats falling off sofas and babies tasting lemons. The training we wrote popped up in 2 counties over. The fund paid for 100 deadbolts and 12 cameras and, because I had to, 47 UV bulbs. One Thursday, I was folding dish towels when Liza called. "Mom," she said, "I keep thinking about when this started, about how small it felt and how big it got." She paused. "I'm sorry I didn't catch it sooner." "Stop," I said. "You believed me when it mattered. That's the whole thing." "I'm afraid of getting old," she confessed. She's 44, all elbows and competence. "Good," I said. "Fear keeps your eyes open. Respect keeps your hands gentle. The rest is just good socks and a decent list." She laughed, watery, and promised to bring over soup. She did. It was too salty. I ate 2 bowls. The jeweler's plaque sits on my dresser now, propped against the velvet case the way a woman in a frame leans into her light. Sometimes at night, I turn on the foyer bulb and watch the hall go purple. A quiet reminder that truth can be made visible with the right attention. Truth and the hands that touch it. The last piece returned to me in the oddest way because life has a sense of humor I've decided to stop fighting. A package arrived, insured and signed for, from a pawn shop 3 states away that Rick's partnership had used to sluice merchandise when local shelves got too warm. Inside, in an envelope with a letterhead that did not poison itself, was my grandmother's crescent moon brooch.
The pawnbroker, under new management and apparently with a mother who did not raise a fool, was returning all items that matched the AG's list. The note said, "We're sorry. We didn't ask the right questions." I held the brooch up to my kitchen window and caught the morning light. It glowed the honest way. And that, friends, is where revenge ends and repair begins. I didn't ruin anyone's life. I revealed what they were already doing to themselves and made it cost what it should. I didn't burn anything down. I flipped a switch. I didn't become the stereotype in their notes. I became the footnote in their policy manual, the line that says, "Do not underestimate the client." If you're still with me, if you followed me from the silk scarf and the nurse with patient eyes to the foyer lamp and the brass plaque and the courtroom and the training manual, you know this already. I was not losing my memory. I was reclaiming my story. And I made sure she'd never forget me. Not because I wanted to haunt her, but because I needed her and anyone who thinks like her to remember that we are not inventory. We are history. Before I go, let me give you the 2 checklists I keep taped inside my pantry door now, right under the cumin. One is for me, one is for my kids, and one, if you live in my zip code, is for you because I have copies. For me, keep a simple inventory with photos. Date it, update it with a pencil. Tell someone when something feels off. One friend makes a chorus. Ask for your notes. Read them with a cookie. Install the light, literal or figurative. Make it easy for the truth to show itself. For my kids, believe me first, we can correct later. Ask questions of the agency like you're buying a used car. Have passwords like a dragon guarding a hoard. Visit, eat the cookies. Look in the jewelry box without making me feel silly. Yes, that's 2 lists. I told you I was a list person. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Now, tell me honestly, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have flipped the light, called the AG, written the training, or something I haven't thought of yet? I'm listening.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.